And good morning to you. You're plugged in on Long Island on 102.3 WBAB and 106.1 BLI. I'm Peter Rizzo, and joining me today is Huntington's Disease Society of America President and CEO Louise Vetter. Louise, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me this morning.
Sure, our pleasure. Now, Louise, can we start with your background and what brought you to the Huntington's Disease Society of America?
I've been a patient advocate all my life. I was born with a chronic lung disease and then was able to turn that into mission work with different nonprofit organizations. And I joined HDSA, the Huntington's Disease Society of America, about a dozen years ago. And I was just so moved by the strength of families affected by Huntington's disease and the power and persistence of this community that as soon as I got to know these families and get involved in this mission, I couldn't turn away.
Now, for the benefit of our listeners, and certainly myself, who's never heard of it until now, can you describe what Huntington's disease is?
Huntington's disease is a brain disease. It is actually a neurodegenerative disease, which means that it affects the neurons in your brain. And over time, it gets worse and worse. So you degenerate over a period of 10 to 30 years. It is a hereditary disease. So if one of your parents has it, you have a 50-50 chance of inheriting the gene that causes Huntington's disease, or we call it HD. And that's part of the challenge of HD is that it goes through families, it goes through generations, and very often you have children who are caregiving for their parents while at the same time living at risk for this disease. And if that isn't bad enough, what makes Huntington's disease so challenging is the complete way that it affects a person's ability to walk, talk, think, and reason. It affects everything from your movement to your ability to communicate. And we often describe it as being a combination of Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and even ALS all at the same time.
Now, Louise, I've heard and read that neurological disorders like Parkinson's disease, Lewy body dementia, and one I've heard of recently, more often called supranuclear palsy, often have symptoms that mimic one another, making a diagnosis oftentimes very difficult. Does Huntington's disease fall into this same sort of opaque category, or are its symptoms more unique and easier to detect?
That's a great question because Huntington's disease is incredibly complicated to diagnose purely on the symptoms. Very often, some of the more disabling symptoms are actually mental health related challenges, depression, anxiety, inability to control your emotional reactions to situations. There may be forgetfulness or executive function slowness. And all of those things can be a lot of other conditions. Even the movement disorder of Huntington's disease can be confused or misread by non-skilled clinicians who just don't know movement disorders as something like Parkinson's disease or tardive dyskinesia. What makes HD a little bit different is the family component. So usually, you know if your parents have it. And then it's a matter of sort of symptom searching, and there is a genetic test to find out if, in fact, it is the mutant gene that's causing it.
What does the genetic test entail?
It's just a blood draw, but unlike so many other genetic tests, this is actually a diagnosis, right? So it's not just you're at risk for something. It is something in your DNA that if you have it, you will develop the disease. It's not a matter of if, there's nothing you can do at this point in time to prevent it. So it's a really challenging and difficult decision to make to decide if you want to get tested. And as a result, the majority of Americans at risk for inheriting Huntington's disease do not get the genetic test prior to symptoms.
Now, I want to dive in a little bit more about the genetic makeup of Huntington's disease. If you're just joining us today on Plugged In on Long Island, we're talking with Louise Vetter, President and CEO of the Huntington's Disease Society of America. Now, with HD being hereditary, are there certain types of folks who are more susceptible of getting the disease?
Unfortunately, no. Huntington's disease is an equal opportunity offender. It affects all genders, all races, all cultures. Anyone is at risk for developing Huntington's disease. In fact, all humans have the Huntington protein. It is a naturally occurring protein that is incredibly important in embryonic development. And while we don't know everything that it does, because the human body is a miraculously complicated thing, we know that it is fundamental to human life. But the problem is that for some people, their Huntington protein is a little bit longer than it should be. So you inherit two copies of the Huntington gene, one from your mom, one from your dad. And if one of those is exceptionally long and has a sort of a stutter on the end of it, it actually gunks up the machinery in your brain. And it's a very non-scientific description, but I'm not a scientist. And so I think of it in terms of practically what is it doing in your brain to get in the way of the normal function of your neurons. And that's really what happens when you have this sort of supersized chunk of Huntington protein that's messing up the machinery. And your body can compensate for a while, but then usually in your 30s or 40s, depending on the length of this extra piece of protein, you start to develop the symptoms. Your body just can't compensate anymore, and the effects of the disease start to occur.
What are the most textbook symptoms?
For a long time, Huntington's was only thought of as a movement disorder. So I have to point out that it used to be called Huntington's chorea. It was actually identified by a man named George Huntington, which is how it got its name, and it was sort of cited historically because of a group of families actually out on Long Island that started to show patterns of dying prematurely, having these movements. It's called chorea. That makes it different than the fine motor limitations of other diseases. And so it for a long time was considered just a movement disease. But in the last, I would say, 30 years, there's been a lot more clinical understanding of the other aspects of emotional and cognitive sort of implications of the disease.
I imagine this is a moot question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there a cure for Huntington's disease?
Not yet. There are some treatments available to help manage the movement symptoms of the disease. And of course, families are able to, working with their clinician, treat the depression and the anxiety and some of the other symptoms for which there are available therapies. But the root cause of the disease, the fundamental disease progression, at this point, we don't have a way to interrupt that or slow it down.
Now, are there preventative things one can do, be it changes to the diet, increased exercise, staying away from stuff like cigarettes or alcohol, for instance, to help reduce one's chances of getting Huntington's disease? Or does it purely come down to genetic disposition?
Fundamentally, it's a genetic disease. It's either in your genes or it's not. However, as with many things, we're still learning, and we do know that it is important to stay healthy and live your best life. So we do counsel folks to eat well, to take care of themselves, to stay physically active. All of those things that exercise your mind and body sort of build health that puts you at maybe a higher or stronger place when the symptoms do start to roll out. So we want folks to be as proactive as possible in their health, knowing that it sort of puts them ahead before they start to develop those symptoms.
Do we know how many people on Long Island are afflicted with Huntington's disease?
Not Long Island specifically. I
Hmm.
know that there are about 5,000 New Yorkers who have been diagnosed with Huntington's disease. But as with so many things, diagnosis is a loaded term because you can be at risk and start to have these soft symptoms, these early symptoms, but not yet have gone into a neurologist or a movement specialist and specifically sought the diagnosis. And a lot of that is because we don't know how to slow the disease at this point in time, and you don't want to risk your employment, your independence, and some of the other things that come with having a defined label of having disease onset.
Now, Louise, I understand you have a bill in Congress. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, we've been working for a long time to get something called the HD, or Huntington's Disease Parity Act, passed in Congress. We've got some amazing congressional champions, not only on the House of Representatives side, but also on the Senate side, including Congresswoman Kathleen Rice, right out there on Long Island, who's been a champion for us. And the goal of the HD Parity Act is actually to allow families affected by HD to take advantage of their health benefits as soon as they qualify for disability support. So right now, the way the U.S. disability system works, once you qualify as disabled, which is a long drawn out process that takes on average 6 months, you then have to wait 2 years before your Medicare benefits kick in. So you're sick enough to qualify as disabled, but now you have to struggle on your own for 2 years without any support from the federal government, no health insurance, because of course, if you're disabled, you're not working, right? So unless you are on your spouse's insurance plan for health benefits, you likely have no health support, and you're caught for 2 years. During that time, you're getting sicker. You're probably having to make horrible decisions about whether or not to pay rent or your mortgage or buy the drugs and the medicines that help make you feel better and improve your quality of life. So it's just this downward spiral. The HD Parity Act would fix this, and it would allow families with Huntington's, as soon as they qualify for disability, to immediately have access to health benefits. We think this is common sense. They've done it for other communities, including the ALS community. So we feel like it's time for HD families to get this support as well.
What hurdles does it have to clear in order for it to pass?
We need to get Congress to act, right? So we have a lot of bipartisan champions. We just need the numbers, and for a rare disease, bipartisan is great. Numbers are hard. So the way to get this to pass is for folks like you and me all around this country, throughout Long Island, to send notes to their elected officials saying, please pass the HD Parity Act. The more they hear from the community, the more it's on their radar, and the more likely that it is able to be passed. We know the president would sign it into law. We just need to get it to his desk.
I'm Pete Rizzo. You're plugged into Long Island on 102.3 WBAB and 106.1 BLI. And today I'm speaking with Huntington's Disease Society of America President and CEO Louise Vetter. Now, Louise, there's a big event coming up, the Long Island Team Hope Walk. It's happening, I believe, next Sunday. Can you give our listeners sort of the where and when, and also what is Team Hope?
Team Hope is a community-wide commitment to raising awareness of Huntington's disease and helping to raise some funds to support families affected by HD. So we do more than 100 Team Hope walks around the country of all different shapes and sizes. The one that we're hosting on Sunday, September 18th out on Long Island is actually one of our largest and one of our oldest Team Hope walks. We've been doing this event for more than a dozen years. Last year, it raised more than $40,000 to support the Huntington's Disease Society of America's work to support families and also fund research to better understand and hopefully one day cure HD. So it's going to be a great event. We have hundreds of folks who come out just to be a part of something bigger than them and make a difference. This year's event is at Wantagh Park. Previously, the event had been held at Belmont Lake State Park, but we're really excited. Last year, we tried out Wantagh Park. It worked really well, and it's just a great day. So we start at 8 a.m. with registration. The walk starts at 9. It is nothing too strenuous. It's really about just being together.
How can somebody register, donate, and or sponsor the walk?
HDSA's website is really the portal for all information, not only about Huntington's disease, but how to get involved and learn more. So HDSA, Huntington's Disease Society of America, so hdsa.org/THW Long Island. So that's hdsa.org/THW Long Island for the Team Hope Walk Long Island. And you find all the details for the event. Folks can sign up, they can raise a little money, but again, a lot of it is just coming together and shouting out loud that we need more treatment and more cure for this disease.
What kind of a turnout are you expecting or hoping for this year?
In recent years, even with the pandemic, we had, well over 200 folks come. So
Wonderful.
I'm crossing my fingers for a beautiful day. And, and I would love to have 350, 400 folks there. But I think one of the great things about this event is the way everyone comes together to make sure that the fundraising doesn't end when the event ends. We actually have an online raffle that stays open for 12 days after the event. And all of that's on the website, hdsa.org/THW Long Island. And we have some really amazing sports items from the Knicks and the Jets, and I'm pretty sure the Islanders. I think even there's something from the Giants, but it's an opportunity for folks to bid on some cool stuff and support the mission for an extra week and a half.
You actually segue beautifully into my next question, Louise, about the sports memorabilia that you can win at the online auction. What's up for grabs?
Oh, so I'm going to look at my notes here.
No
We've
problem.
got a jersey signed by Ryan Pulock of the Islanders.
Hmm.
We've got a signed photo from Obi Toppin from the Knicks, who I was told is rising and is going to be a hot item.
He's a
We've
very
got
good player. Yes. Yeah, he's
he's
up and coming very fast.
so excited about that. We've got a puck from Ryan Lindgren of the Rangers, and there's also some raffle items that we have going on. Some tickets for a Yankee game, vouchers for a Mets game, Long Island Ducks. So there's some other really cool ways to bid on stuff and get involved.
Now, when does the auction close, and when will you be announcing the winners?
The auction closes when September ends. So it closes on September 30th at the end of the day. And I'm pretty sure that by Monday the 3rd, all the winners will be contacted.
Sounds good. If you're just tuning in, today I'm speaking with Louise Vetter, President and CEO of Huntington's Disease Society of America here on Plugged In Long Island. Now, Louise, what's the most rewarding part of your job and what's the most frustrating aspect of it?
The frustrating part is easy to answer. The fact that we don't have a way to meaningfully stop this disease. So it is progressive. It affects generations. So I've been with the organization now for 12 years, and I've gone to too many funerals, sent too many condolence cards, and more often than not, I'm now connecting with children who lost their parents 10 years ago and now are facing symptoms. So just the perpetual, overwhelming devastation of this disease is exhausting and real, and science is way too slow. The most rewarding part is just the strength of these families, and anything that I can do, that we as an organization, HDSA, can do to help families get information, to reduce the frustration and isolation that comes with having a rare disease, that gives meaning to our work and what we do. Huntington's disease comes with a lot of judgment, unfortunately. People who don't understand the disease and struggle with its hereditary nature. Folks who might see somebody with Huntington's disease who's kind of stumbling along. Maybe they've got really extreme movement. And they might see that person, and rather than understanding what they're going through, might just say, oh, that person's drunk, right? And so, what we try and do is raise awareness and build that community compassion and empathy to support families, and slowly we're making a difference that way too.
Now, you talk about the isolation of having a disease as rare as this one. I would imagine the pandemic had a huge effect on sort of your day to day. What does the new normal look like for you as far as the work you're doing with Huntington's Disease Society of America?
At HDSA, we never stopped. We knew that COVID was going to come and go, and unfortunately, HD remains, right? And the mission of HDSA to improve the lives of everyone affected by Huntington's disease is just as important now as it was pre-COVID. So we pivoted quickly and did a lot of events online. We had virtual Team Hope walks for a little while. We moved all of our support groups online. Many of the centers of excellence, which are expert care centers that are working with HD families, and we have one at Stony Brook out on Long Island, they had to do care through telehealth and use telemedicine differently. But we pivoted, and now we're thrilled to be able to be back in person.
Now, as far as the lack of progress or the speed around progress in finding answers for HD, is that really, do you see any change in that for the better going forward?
We learn something new every day, and even the bad news teaches us something. The Huntington's disease community has, over the years, been a part of clinical trials to explore different therapies, and unfortunately, we haven't had that big breakthrough yet. But I believe that the more companies that we have working on developing drugs, the more scientists we have trying to better understand how the body responds to the mutated Huntington protein, the greater the chance of us figuring it out. So we want to put a lot of shots on goal. We want to get lots of people involved, so that we can help families as completely as we can, while also making sure that the science is moving forward as quickly as it can. So a lot of nonprofits focus either on research or care. We believe that we have to be able to do it all, right? We have to be able to conquer both sides of that equation, so that we can help families today and tomorrow. And I think I know that there's a better future ahead.
Louise, in closing, what's your website and phone number, and where can people find you both in person and on social media?
HDSA has a really strong social media and web presence. Our main website is hdsa.org. There's information on all of our walks, including the Team Hope Walk Long Island, by adding a slash, so hdsa.org/THW Long Island. We also can be found right on our main website. If you go to hdsa.org, we've got a YouTube channel, we've got links to all of our social platforms, and really just encourage folks to be curious, and to get to learn more and join us.
Huntington's Disease Society of America President and CEO Louise Vetter, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Pete.
Our pleasure. And it's great to shed light on this disease. It really deserves the attention. I'm Pete Rizzo. You're plugged in to Long Island. Thanks for tuning in.